Welcome back to this explainer. Let's jump right into how philosopher John Rawls constructs a perfectly fair society, literally from the ground up. Think of him like an architect drafting the ultimate blueprint for justice.
Here is our blueprint for today. We're going to start with a quick recap, lay down the foundations of fairness, climb through Rawls' strict priority rules, and finish up with a surprisingly simple, real-world example, cutting a cake.
All right, let's look back at where we left off.
So in part 1, we covered Plato and Aristotle's views on justice, and we looked at the rights-based, desert-based, and need-based approaches. We also broke down the 4 main types of justice: commutative, legal, contributive, and distributive. And that last one, distributive justice, is exactly where we pick up today with the groundbreaking work of John Rawls.
Let's dive right into Section 2, the foundations of fairness.
Rawls built one of the most influential modern theories of justice, which he famously called justice as fairness. Basically, his theory aims to ensure the continuous, fair distribution of what he terms social primary goods to every single member of society. We're talking about things like rights, liberties, powers, and opportunities. Now, he does draw a strict line between these and natural goods, things like your health, intelligence, or natural vigor. Society can't directly hand those out, right? But Rawls points out that social institutions definitely still affect them or are affected by them.
To build his social contract, Rawls takes a really hard swing at utilitarianism. You know, the idea of doing the most good for the most people? Well, he argues that utilitarianism can actually justify, or at least condone, sacrificing the well-being of a few individuals just to maximize happiness for the majority. Rawls absolutely rejects this. For him, there is no trade-off where sacrificing individuals is okay. Period.
For this justice as fairness idea to actually work, Rawls says every citizen needs 2 core capacities. First, you have to be able to understand, apply, and act on the principles of justice. And second, you need the capacity to form, revise, and pursue your own personal conception of the good. But here is the absolute kicker. In Rawls' eyes, justice must always reach toward the least advantaged members of society. That's a real game changer.
And to make sure that happens, he introduces this concept called lexical priority. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying there's a strict ladder of rules. The first principle must be 100% satisfied before you can even think about moving up to the next one. It's a strict order, no compromises, no trade-offs.
Okay, so let's look at that very first rung on the ladder, priority 1. Rawls organizes his theory around a strict order, starting with the equal liberty principle. It basically asks what makes us free and equal citizens. For Rawls, it absolutely comes down to equal opportunities. The moral equality of citizens means every single person has, and sees themselves as having, a right to equal respect when figuring out the basic rules of their society. In the real world, this translates directly to the liberty to participate in politics and the freedom of thought.
Moving right along to Section 4, Priority 2, where we tackle the tricky issue of inequality.
So once that first principle of equal liberty is fully secured, Principle 2 kicks in. Interestingly, Rawls actually accepts that socioeconomic inequalities can be just, but, and this is a massive but, only under 2 strict conditions. First, positions of power and wealth must be open to everyone under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. So no unfair advantages just because of where you were born, your inherited talents, or your family background. Second, any inequality that does exist must benefit everybody. He calls this the difference principle. This is exactly how Rawls arrives at his support for the welfare state. He believes in the redistribution of resources, which naturally leads to his support for things like taxation and reservation policies to help balance the scales.
Now, if all of that sounds a bit abstract, let's jump to Section 5 for a brilliantly simple physical example.
Imagine we need to divide a cake perfectly fairly among a group of people. If a fair division means an equal one, what exact procedure guarantees that outcome?
Setting aside any complex math, the most obvious and elegant solution is this. You let one person cut the cake, but you make absolutely sure that the cutter is the last person to choose their piece. Everyone else gets to pick before them.
Because they have absolutely no idea which piece they'll be left with, the cutter is highly incentivized to slice that cake as evenly as humanly possible. It's brilliant, right? You structure the rules to force a fair outcome simply because you don't know where you're going to end up. This is the very heart of Rawls' entire philosophy.
Coming up in Part 3, we're going to wrap up Rawls' conclusions on redress and taxation, and we'll see how thinkers like Robert Nozick, alongside Marxist and democratic socialist thought, respond to his ideas. Because, if justice is as simple as cutting a cake, it begs one final rather provocative question: who actually gets to decide who baked the cake in the first place? I'll see you in the next